Strategy, security, international affairs, international law, climate, space, and much, much more. Today, I have the distinct pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Gerasimos Rodotheatos, who's an assistant professor of international law and security at the American University in the Emirates in Dubai, in the UAE. My name is Dr. Efthymiopoulos. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Strategy International. And this is Prime Analysis. Dr. Gerasimos, thank you very much for coming on another web series of Prime Analysis here at Strategy International.
It's a big pleasure to be here, Dr. Marios. It's my first time doing the Prime Analysis. I hope it's not the last. It's a big honor, and I'm very happy to join you today.
I know that your shortened version of Gerasimos is Makis, and we've been colleagues for many years, also at some point in Dubai. And I'm very glad and thankful that you're here. Considering that we have many things to discuss, since we are very much looking forward into your opinions and considering the volatilities, but also opportunities that are around us. Now, allow me to start with something that we usually do at Prime Analysis. We commonly start with the life of the one that we have a discussion with. So allow me to ask you my very first question. How is young Makis, young Gerasimos, the person who just finished school, is envisioning life in his own profession?
A very hard question to answer. I would say in one word, disoriented. I grew up in the 80s in the city of Patras, a favorite place that is close to my heart, even though that I consider myself as Kefalonian.
That's in Greece.
For sure. Mm-hmm. I finished school and oops, what do we do now? This was in the beginning of 2000. Greece was actually at a very good spot. Many interesting things were happening. But to be honest, as many people of my generation, we didn't have a vision. We're lacking the vision. So once I entered university, it was Pantheon University and the Department of International and European Studies. It was a huge challenge for me. I had to adapt to a new situation, new life, many different things. To be honest, following the classes was not, my favorite. And unfortunately, this was common for many students back then. Many people.
Why is that?
Why is that? I'll give you an example that I still use today if I want to describe the higher education system in Greece. The cohort of the department was 160 students. The biggest classroom that we were using had 60 seats. So this means that approximately 100 students should sit either on the bench, on the floor, or just walk out of the room. And this is one of the biggest challenges of the higher education system in Greece, even till today. So a lot of things that I learned, I was really happy to have very good professors, excellent professors, top-class professors. But I soon realized that I have to figure out on my own what are my favorite subjects, what I want to do with my career and my life. And this is how I managed to do that. I started looking for things, trying things, doing internships, traveling, joining scientific events, and then I started building my academic profile. But definitely it wasn't an easy task.
The academic profile, was it strategic vision that you had vis-a-vis the things that you want to do? The reason why I'm asking this is because during our discussion, I'm going to be asking you elements that are very much reflective towards your academic background, towards your experiences, towards your teaching experiences also, and also your current research.
Actually, I had to do it step by step. I followed specific subjects that I liked, and strategic studies was one of them. But I realized soon enough that it's not suiting myself or my personality. So I started looking for other things, such as, for example, development affairs, humanitarian affairs, and later on, environmental topics, or my favorite subject, law of the sea. And this was done in a gradual, let's say, way, with a gradual pace. And I had to go all through these steps that I mentioned before. Studying, reading, trying out things, meeting interesting people that were good mentors and good, let's say, professionals that show me the way.
while you were talking, I was trying to if you want, script the next steps, and if that's possible. While I know your expertise on international law of the seas, I would like to start with this. And what I'm going to do is I would like us to discuss a bit also for the audience to explain a few things with regard to those specialties that I'm going to be asking you, and then we can go, if you want, in the analysis of the current state of affairs as global as we can, or if you want, as local as we can. So, why did you choose international law of the seas? Is it because Greece is surrounded by water? Is it because we have a huge interest? Is it because we have maritimers? What was the reason behind it?
Great. As I told you, I grew up in a place that is right next to the sea. My parents come from an island, so I was deeply, let's say, connected with the seas. I always had this vision, this will to work with the sea or by the sea or something like that. And actually, this was a great academic match. As I was finishing my master's, I was discussing with my supervisor, and he proposed a topic for a PhD. We had some discussions, we exchanged some opinions, and one of the most important things that were mentioned is that Greece is one of the, let's say, mightiest maritime nations. We have a huge fleet, we have a huge coastline, we have a rich insular culture, and all these things were very appealing for me. So this is how I decided to work on this affair.
To be more specific, the maritime power of Greece used to be number 2, now it's number 3 on the rise of China, but we are number 3 around the world with regards to transport and maritime, anything that has to do with maritime operations, if I may call it like this. So then you mixed the law of the seas with international law, if I may say. Why law?
Why law? That's a good question. Even though I don't identify as a lawyer, I consider that political science people and people that have studied international relations have a very good, let's say, vision, a very good view on international law. Some people say that international law is not exactly law. It's very different compared to domestic law, the structure, the way it works, the sources, the subjects, everything is different. So if you're a lawyer, you have one kind of approach, which is right. But if you have an international relations background, your vision, your view on international law is far more accurate, if you're asking me.
Indeed. And this is something that you have to pivot into. I guess that in international politics or political science or even analysis of political affairs, the requirement or the request to have a good knowledge of international law, and in general, the legal prerequisites, depending on which country you're going into, plus international economics, national economics, trade, and all these things. And I think it's combined, because otherwise political science per se it differs in a great ways versus international relations. And I think that's where we are at this point. So international relations, where does it come into perspective? Like the international legal perspective, the international political perspectives, the combination of those elements.
As I tell to my students, international law is not the panacea, it's not the absolute solution for all the international problems that we have. Many problems, many challenges that the international community is facing today are based on legal disputes. But again, you don't expect one, let's say, list of clauses or articles to solve your problem. The approaches should be realistic. And today, international affairs are very complex, sometimes overcomplicated, but you need to have a good understanding of the rules, the dynamics, the economy, the diplomatic relations, and so on. So it's like having a big puzzle with thousands of pieces that you have to figure out how to place them in the right order. Being able to understand the legal framework is just the beginning.
You mentioned earlier that you did internships, that you started working with different sectors, institutions, and stuff like that. Where do you find yourself, or in which parts did you exercise, for example, the legal perspective or the law of the seas, or groups that you were doing between students or professors or other institutions where you exercise international political analysis, let's say? Give us a few ideas of the combination, because I know that there are a lot of students watching this, a lot of people that would be interested on the pathway, and I think the pathway really makes sense vis-a-vis what we're going to say soon after.
The three subjects that I have worked a lot in my life, law of the sea, environmental law, and development law, are actually part of, let's say, a younger approach, a fresher view on international law. This started in the 60s and the 70s. It's during the decolonization period. And this is a period where the international community of states changes. The change is not political, it's not a one-time event, but through historical processes, everything changes. The way we operate, the way states strategize, or the way states legislate. And this is very interesting because we have a whole new dynamic in international affairs. By being able to understand all the subjects that I told you, environment, development, and law of the sea, actually you can read the diplomatic history and you can understand what was happening back then. And later on, if you follow the progress, what are the extensions of these?
You mentioned development, you mentioned international law of the seas, and you mentioned environment. What about war? What about war studies? What about strategies on war? What about technology added value? Because you said that history, I mean, you projected the end. So I presume the means to the end is everything that's taking place historically to today. So the idea of where do you put war studies? And I say war studies because I'm trying to frame it in the volatility that is really happening around us. Is it because of climate? Is it because of development? Is it because of opportunities that are coming into us, in front of us, to expand or minimize, to develop or otherwise? And I just start with a theoretical perspective, and then we'll take it case by case.
Perfect. Yes, that's an excellent question. Actually, the environmental implications of war are very important. But as we're teaching at the American University, sometimes wars and conflicts are the outcomes of environmental problems or development programs. Today, we cannot discuss about environmental affairs without using the term, the notion of sustainable development. We all know what sustainable development is, the three pillars: society, economy, and environment. And actually, this is the face of modern states. Today, governments are not just focusing on traditional, let's say, state security or national security. They're also doing a lot of work regarding soft security or human security. There is no meaning to try to have strong armies and, let's say, secure borders if you cannot solve the daily problems of your people.
So you're trying to elaborate on the necessity of what means defense. I do understand that you have to secure the resilience of a nation, and in this case, we are talking exactly the words and that are really framed in the area where you're coming from. In this case, in the Gulf, that the resilience of the nation requires interoperability, sustainability, capacity building, and so on and so forth. Standards which are also in the Euro-Atlantic region. The difference is that there are primary and secondary important elements. Some of them we consider them a soft power, hard power. I think everything is, for me, but this is me, I think that everything is necessary now, because if you cannot secure state sovereignty, you cannot secure development. You cannot secure even the inclusion of the problem of the environment or everything that comes into it. You cannot sustain your seas, the natural habitat, the underground, the undersea water elements, which are also important, and we're going to go into this, but also actual defense against any external or internal possible threat that may come into being. So let me just start with the following. Let me project, if you want, international affairs from the point of view of volatility and conflicts. So there is a conflict that started in 2022, which is in reality started early in 2014 in Crimea. I'm talking about the illegal invasion of Russia into Ukraine. We are 3 years in. We are amidst the start of negotiations, hard negotiations, where, among others, we talk about natural resources, development, rebuilding, payments. We're talking about airspace, land, and probably sea, because we're talking about the Black Sea. We're talking about the Dnieper River. We're talking about reconstruction. The reconstruction is also environmental destruction and reconstruction of that habitat. Tell us a few things about this, away, as you said, from the traditional war situations that are happening that we know of between Russia and Ukraine.
Exactly. It always starts with state security, but state security, as we said, is a very traditional concept. So a serious government, a serious administration should be working on parallel, if I may add this comment. Switching now to the illegal invasion of Russia in Ukraine, that was in two phases and it's still ongoing. We see that there is some diplomatic movement recently, and this was something expected under the new administration in the United States, but we don't know how this is going to end up. Yes, there is mobility, but it's still a bit early to say what's going to happen. One of the most interesting aspects, and you kind of touched this, was that one of the first things that the US government tried to place on the negotiation table has to do with mineral resources of Ukraine. This is an interesting thing. I'm thinking parallel to this, to the discussion regarding Greenland. And Greenland is another topic of priority for the US administration. I recently figured out that there is a MAGA for Greenland, Make Greenland Great Again. So, and this is also related to mineral resources. We know that these things belong to the future, raw materials or rare earths, and we're going to have a lot of, let's say, antagonism between the major industrial powers,
which are going to try to get.
Exactly. You don't only want to have access, but you want to exclude the others. This is also important.
Yes.
You need to have this exclusivity that will give you the competitive advantage or the complete advantage over specific things.
Because one of the things, I mean, I'm opening, if you want the discussion in this one of the things that we are not doing is we are not envisioning how the other side is anticipating now the utility of those mineral resources. It seems that Europe wants to make the use of mineral resources in the payment back of Ukraine plus the rebuilding of Ukraine. The US wants to be paid back its money with interest with regards to the mineral resources and much, much more. And at the same time, there's another element, Great Britain, which has made an agreement over the 100 years with Ukraine for supporting on all levels, and therefore I understand also as business. On the back end, what are the lessons to be learned from Ukraine, as you correctly put, are going to be involved into the negotiations on the future of Greenland. But mind you that if we look at the map, northern Ukraine also matters, and Greenland also matters, and they intercommute somewhere in the northern parts of the seas. So it's of no wonder that things are coming. But one of my assumptions, if you want in this case, is that they're trying to find an alternate route of trade between the West and the East, because the South, meaning Southeast Med, Red Sea, and so on and so forth, has become a bit unbearable for the consequential protection or operational power capacity. So they're trying to find an alternative route that may be cheaper both in time and money. So what you're saying to the Greenland plus Ukraine, if I can add this, that combination?
True, that's true. That's awfully true. May I remind you historically that Russia, even during the Tsar times or later on during the Soviet Union times, they always wanted strategic access to warmer seas.
Yes.
Since many centuries ago.
Yes.
The unfortunate event is that now the Arctic is becoming a warmer sea, not a warm sea.
Because of climate change.
Because of climate change and the actually global warming and the melting of the ice caps in the Siberia or northern parts of Canada or even Greenland.
Right.
And this is changing the landscape completely, and it's a long, let's say, path that will not stop soon enough. One of the things that I was discussing recently with my students is that Greenland, which is one of the biggest, probably the biggest islands in the world, has very limited, let's say, residents, something like 60,000.
Mostly located in the south.
Exactly, to the south and close to the coast.
Southwest.
And now, approximately 80 to 90% of the surface of Greenland is covered by ice. Unfortunately, in the near future, we don't know when, we will see more and more parts of Greenland melting down. This has many side effects. It's also contributing to the sea level rise. Remember that the sea level is going up because of the glaciers melting, like Himalayas or Greenland. The effects of this do not, let's say, place a heavy burden in Russia or in Canada, but they're actually inundating some islands really far away, like islands in the Pacific Ocean or the Caribbean. So you see that one event, one environmental problem, if I may say so, is having strategical impacts, environmental impacts, or even diplomatic impacts. Going now back to trade and the sea routes, we expect more and more trade to transverse through the Arctic Circle. Some countries are very skeptical about that, especially Canada, that has huge environmental concerns because of the Canadian archipelago. Some other countries are more, let's say, lenient, more relaxed. And you also have the United States presence with Alaska. And we should expect now, under the new administration, a return maybe as regards oil and gas exploitation in up there.
Yeah, it's quite interesting you mentioned this because in our recent past, in the first season of Prime Analysis, we had a discussion with one now former senators of the U.S. vis-a-vis the elements of small island nation states and being affected in the Pacific Ocean by the possibility of an environmental destruction that may come into being. And in fact, what you said about Greenland is also reality, but it is also a strategic reality that the United States has been having. It used to have two bases, now it has one base, one big base in the northwest part. And it's actually a very important strategic place of understanding and contact and logistics and so on, followed by Iceland. And Iceland is also important, and the U.S. also is stationed there with 4 radars and more, and a lot of troops, more than 40,000 troops, for the northern part of the seas. It is also true, as you correctly put, on the discussion has been going on since the 18th and 19th century. But what is interesting towards what you said is that none of us probably anticipates that element of climate change or climate threat. Hence, I was thinking that while you were talking about that, President Trump turned around and said, we will protect you from anything that may come along. So probably he's also meaning the the possible environmental destruction that may come to it because of climate. And this is something that we may anticipate, but we don't talk, because mostly we think, as you said in the very beginning, traditional competition, traditional volatilities, and so on and so forth. So what's the role of England? What's the role of Denmark? We know that both of them don't really look well towards what the U.S. is doing. It was only recent that Donald Trump said that you have to take away your installations, your solar installations of the seas in order to have the allowance of movement of maritime ships. What's your take on this with vis-a-vis the Red Sea? The Northern Sea.
Northern Sea. Before I come to your question, I would like to grasp something that you said. You spoke about protection and the problem of global warming. And actually, all states have huge responsibilities regarding global warming. If we're talking about protection, the best way to protect the environment is actually to prevent these problems. If we want to help ourselves, or if we want to help other countries that are suffering, we need to start with the mitigation strategy.
Okay.
Adaptation is something that is coming eventually, since the problem is there, it's alive and kicking. But we really need to focus on mitigation. And these things are being discussed every year in the Conference of Parties of Climate Change Convention. I remember 2 years ago attending COP28 in Dubai, and the discussion is still alive. So if we want to help the others, let's start with fixing the problem, and then we can also provide assistance. Regarding the cooperation and the maritime traffic up in the north, it comes as a surprise, this discussion at this point of time. The countries that you mentioned, with the exception of Russia, are NATO member countries. They have been working together hand by hand for more than 60, 70, 80 years. There are established bases of cooperation. So we really don't realize why this is happening.
They don't want this sort of competition coming in. There was an official statement of the Danes, obviously about Greenland, but the Danes also, it's not about Greenland. They said that this is our area, our space. I think that problem eventually comes along because of the glaciers falling apart, basically, and because of the rise of the roots, if you want, of the new roots now being established. On the other hand, what I was thinking is, you want to mediate or you want to negotiate the environment, and there goes the U.S., which withdraws from the Paris Agreement, and there goes the United States that goes back into drill, baby, drill. Gulf of Mexico becomes Gulf of America. It has also potential for drilling and potential for other legal elements. Correctly put, it's a mediation process, but it seems that he does hardline business politics, if I can call it like this, vis-a-vis their requirements, for natural habitat, for the utility of natural resources, mineral resources, roots, and so on and so forth. But he does it in a very unorthodox way. What you're saying in this, so we can now pivot, if you want, to other areas.
Sure. You mentioned the Danes and the position of the government of Denmark, which is actually true. It's a fact. Greenland is part of Denmark, but may I remind you that Greenland has a high level of autonomy. It has its own parliament, its own local government, and since 2009, according to Danish legislation, Denmark may opt out from Denmark. Maybe they can become Greenland. Yes.
Denmark.
They can become independent. They can claim independence. And when we're talking about the rights of the Greenlanders, we're talking about a standing alone population. It's actually a nation that has its own rights. May I remind you the right of self-determination. I don't know if anyone is thinking about these things. They think that, it's just a big island with 60,000 souls and, let's help these guys. But may I remind you that these people have been living there for hundreds of years. They have their own cultures, traditions, rituals, and they have their own way of living that needs to be, let's say, safeguarded. Greenland is very interesting in terms of the European Union because Greenland has opted out of the European legislation. Denmark is a full member, but the European acquis communautaire does not apply on Greenland for specific reasons. One of the first, let's say, entities that responded to the US calls was the European Union itself, saying that, guys, don't forget, Greenland is actually a European soil, not full member of the European Union, but there is an open communication with Greenland and it qualifies as an OCT, overseas territory. And we should always remember this.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point you mentioned. Allow me to add my 2 cents on this. It was only recently that there were elections in Greenland. It seems that the far right, as they called it, party got elected, and they look, at least in the first news are coming out in the media, they're very separatists versus probably going from an autonomy to an independence and so on. We're yet to see what's going to happen. The second thing that I was thinking was the possibility of Greenland to play a pivotal role, not so much in the uses of any potential minerals that may have, because it has some minerals which are very important, but the strategic location. Once the ice melts, there will be land, and that land is of strategic importance. And the third one, which we also do not consider, but this is also important to say, indirectly, Greenland has seen so much advertisement these past months that even myself, I would like to visit Greenland, and I started watching how Greenland is, what's information about Greenland, more detailed information than just the historical value of Greenland. So I also guess that Greenland will now boost its tourism industry, and it was only recently also that they made expansions on basic infrastructure or major infrastructure that you connect the world with everybody else. And it seems also that the United States is going to promise massive investment. Obviously, as you can understand, if the U.S. invests in Greenland, it is so little that with a small capacity, you can deliver great things for Greenland. So this is only for the 2 cents to add. And now let me go, considering your experiences, to something that really is closer to us, both to where you are residing and where we are today, Southeast Med. I know that we might see things differently in terms of challenges, what Ukraine's happening, what's happening in Greenland, what's happening in the Northern Sea. Nonetheless, things are very interconnected, definitely on trade, definitely on water, definitely on the next day after war in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, after the terrorism has been extinct vis-a-vis the terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah for Israel. Um, what do you see happening? What do you foresee happening? And what is the role, if I can say this, if there is a role, and what is the role of the Gulf states in this, if you want, next day out of this instability that has started since 7 October 2023?
There is huge complexity in terms of even the stakeholders. We have state actors, non-state actors. We have countries that are trying to influence or countries that have an interest in the region, and this makes complete sense. It's a region of high geostrategic importance, and it's a region that is high, has very big amount of resources, different types that are critical actually. So this is why you have a lot of players, and this is not something new. Okay, we know that Middle East and the wider area has always been a melting pot. The good thing is that now we see some mobility and things are slowing down in terms of conflicts, but we are really far away from final solutions and final settlements. There are many ideas thrown on the table, but I'm not very optimistic that we will have rigid solutions in the near future. I don't know what's your take on that.
I'll take my take, but I think we should start, if you want, the discussion with the introduction of the Gulf into the Middle East, something that was not in the previous centuries. Not at this capacity or at this level or capability to decide. We've seen recently, for example, negotiations on the Ukraine issue, second time with Saudi Arabia. We've been seeing earlier a lot of negotiations on the Hamas case in Qatar. We've been seeing involvement of the UAE with a humanitarian corridor, with a hospital in Gaza, and so on and so forth. And we've been seeing also the Abrahamic Accord into existence and probably going into another Abrahamic Accord in the near future, considering that people are trying to stabilize the areas, to try seek solutions, plus the fall of the Assad regime. And another regime that we're yet to see what's going to happen. So, first of all, what is your take on the Gulf countries being involved into this, and then we can expand the discussion.
Definitely, for many years, at least in the 20th century, the Arab countries and of the region were trying to portray, let's say, an image of unity, of a common way of thinking, of common approaches. In many occasions, this was true, and we see, for example, a lot of multilateral efforts to support the nation of Palestine.
Right.
They haven't been really successful, unfortunately, as based on the results. But the sense of unity, I think, is growing bigger and bigger in the recent years. Now, with the expansion, let's say, of the how to portray this Arabic unity, or let's say
the GCC, you mean, or the Arab Union?
The wider Arab region, okay, the Western Asia, as we call it in the United Nations. And we have some very strong and powerful countries, for example, the GCC countries, that are really working on solutions. The good thing, as we mentioned, is that we have parallel initiatives. There is no competition on who is going to solve the problem. There is, let's say, this fragmentation of work. Everyone is trying to achieve something, but we should never forget that these big problems and complex problems should include as many stakeholders as possible.
It seems very important that, as you correctly put, everybody is trying to do their own piece. Nonetheless, there is competition. I have to disagree on that. Competition with Turkey. Turkey wants to pivot into the Middle East, and he puts a lot of excuses according to their own understanding of history, according to their own understanding of inclusive power, along with a lot of other elements or influence that they want to do. They're trying to do the same with Ukraine, and goes on and on. So there is competition. What there is in common is to stop the atrocities. because we all agree that atrocities have gone far and beyond. And those atrocities cannot continue. That I think we all agree. But we also agree that in order to solve any war, whether this is the Ukraine-Russia war, whether this is the Libya war, whether this is South-North Sudan, or wherever it may take, or even the war that's been going on with the Islamic Alliance against the Houthis since 2015, you need to end powers such as the Houthis, which are terrorist groups. And it takes a while until people understand that they're damaging their own people. Hamas damaged the Palestinian cause. And Hezbollah damaged the Lebanese people. So it is only obvious that they want something more moderate. And I think something political and not militant at any time. The second thing is establishment of democratic rules, if any, in the Middle East. Israel is a democracy, so there are elections. In Syria, there are not elections yet. Al-Sharaa said that he wants to see elections within the next 4 years, which I don't see it happening. I don't see the future of this administration, if we can call it administration, staying there. But I also do not foresee levels of stability that countries which have a vested interest, which is Turkey, for example, in this case, like they did in Afghanistan, the same thing they want to do in Syria. The Gulf countries have a different approach. The Gulf countries want to rebuild. In order to rebuild societies and people and to be free to go back to their homelands and to their houses, you need end of atrocities. And that's basic international law, basic, not even law. These are the rules. In order to achieve those rules, there needs to be some guarantees. And I think that what we are going to see from the Gulf states or the European Union or the United States, to say more, even from China, because lately China over in the last months have been going more and more on the security status, because it also wants a trade agreements that we cannot go with IMEC, for example, between India, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, with this sort of instability around us and going to the Southeast Med and Europe. So you need stability. But they're coming with different plans, indeed, and agreed. Don't you think that all these stakeholders need to sit down on the table and invite all these parties to say, red lines, you cross these red lines, you're out of the game? What's your intake on this?
I couldn't agree more with what you said, but we're still seeing that some countries have their own agendas and they have their own pursuits regarding third states. I'm not talking about their foreign policies, but if one country wants to dictate what will happen in the internal of another country, that's a flagrant violation of international law, but at the same time, it will not work. There is no legitimacy on that. People feel insecure. So this cannot be part of the solution. For example, you mentioned Turkey in our discussion, but Turkey, may I remind you, is not an Arab state. It's not an Arab nation.
No, but it has an interest.
It has an interest. Many countries have an interest and they have their own approaches. Mm-hmm. But remember, you cannot engage into the problems of others if you're not invited or welcome. Mm-hmm. You cannot engage if you're putting more problems to the already existing problem. It will not work.
That's in theory, because Turkey did three things. The organization of the Turkish state, the organization of the Islamic State, so it wants to play a pivotal role there, and it wants in, not so much in the Arab League, but having a pivotal role vis-a-vis trade. And I think other countries know about that. And they know about that, so although they welcome the goods, and it's a matter of international economics, international trade, it's a matter of competition vis-a-vis what you offer versus what you get, you cannot disqualify the fact that history has its own share. The Middle East got its freedom from the Ottoman ruling. You have an unfinished resolution of conflict with the illegal 50 years of Cyprus, invaded unlawfully by Turkey. This is the same Turkey that has a control of about 50 kilometers within Syria today, even though it supports Sharia. It has a Turkey that wants to oversee stability as a guarantor power. So the new buzz is again rebuilding guarantor power. And there is plenty to be said vis-a-vis how the Arab world needs to see the world itself, because the Arab world is a cross world between the West and the East, even between the West and Africa in multiple ways. So I guess the Arab League and the GCC were actually invited to take probable solutions because of cultural ties with the rest of the Arab states, because of the reconstruction phase that there may be required and their experience may be required, and because it's called burden sharing in the West. What's your take in this?
That's a very complex situation for sure. I don't know if we have the time to discuss and resolve it now, but it's worth giving a shot. As I mentioned previously, complex situations need all the stakeholders on table. What are the big challenges? Who's going to pay the price for it? And I mean the economic price. Yes. Second, who is going to be the guarantor, but not as Turkey portrays that? I mean, who are going to be the countries that will guarantee that peace and security will continue in the long term, but through peaceful means, not through military force or security zones or sanitation zones and all these very uncommon and illegal approaches. Finally, we need to see what's going to happen in the world tomorrow. I think we're standing at the crossroads again. This is a very constant condition in international affairs. Things are changing, and that's normality. Change is normality in international relations, if you ask my opinion. And we need to see what is going to happen with the major powers of the future. As you mentioned, China is making now more bold moves in our neighborhood, which was very uncommon in the past, and China has huge economic interests across the world. We need to see what's going to happen with Russia. Right. Russia is now at the corner spot, mostly because of its, endeavors in Ukraine. But you might see a solution coming soon enough. And trust me, if the solution comes, many of the crimes that Russia is now conducting in Ukraine might be forgotten, if I may use this term, or pardoned. Mm-hmm. So you might see Russia coming back again on the table, participating again in the G8 formation. You might see all these things happening. And then we need to see maybe the big patient of international affairs, which is the European Union. The European Union is trying to find a seat on the table, to have a say on many things, but it's not very easy. But if we go back in recent history, I think it was General de Gaulle that mentioned that we owe the European Union to Joseph Stalin, who was the external federator for the European community, a common, let's say, enemy, an unfriendly power next to your borders that brought all the European countries closer.
A common denominator that brings all the sides together.
Exactly.
And I think having this in mind, I will ask you a final question, which is not so much to do with the analysis. How do you transpire this to your students? I know that we worked in the past, as I said, together in the Gulf. We worked together in the American University, in the Emirates. How do you transpire this to your students? I know, you know, I want our audience to know, because the next generation of leaders that come out are those leaders that actually need to know conditions and dimensions. And we live in a multidisciplinary approach. I know the college is doing a great job, the College of Security and Global Studies at the American University in the Emirates. And the multidisciplinary approach element is really important. So please tell us your take on this.
Exactly. When we have a disaster, because we also teach disaster management to our students, or emergencies across the world where something really bad happens, I go to the class with a big smile and I tell my students, guys, ladies, that's a great day for us. We have a disaster, so we have course material. This is kind of ironic, and unfortunately, international relation experts have a lot of things to discuss with their students. When the Russia-Ukraine war started 3 years ago, the students were engaging in very, very furious, let's say, discussions about the topic. And I told them, you're in a sense lucky, because we're actually going through, we live in a period that things are happening. The discussions are deep, but they should not be, let's say, conducted with passion or with biased opinions. I know that students usually take sides and they say, we like these guys, we don't like these guys. We try to tell to the students, you have your personal opinion, but here we train you to be international relations or security experts. So your opinion should be scientific, academic, and neutral.
Thank you very much, dear Makis, dear Dr. Gerasimos, your full name. I really enjoyed it and I really appreciated this discussion, and I know you're doing a great job down in Dubai at the American University in the Emirates. My regards to the colleagues and to the leadership of the university, and many thanks for having you here and being with us today at Prime Analysis at Strategy International.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mario. It was a real pleasure to have this Prime Analysis with you. Thank you for all your direct and discreet questions. I would like to congratulate you for your work with Strategy International. We follow your work, we share your work with colleagues, with students, and the analysis and the quality that we get is really high. Thank you so much, and congratulations for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching another web series of Prime Analysis here at Strategy International. Please like, share, subscribe, and follow into our YouTube channel and social media. My name is Dr. Marios Efthymiopoulos. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Strategy International. And remember, impact makes a difference.